Huh?
So it's freezing again in here.
Yeah.
And Patrick's not here, and I talked to the others. It went up 1 degree, but it's still cool.
Morning. Hi, Lana.
Hi, how you doing? Ow. Crunchy, crunchy, creak, creak.
Yeah, well, all I've got is green today.
Okay, I'm gonna go out and buy us some blacks, because they don't survive.
Norway. No. We're doing Norway?
Yep.
That was a good guess.
Yes, it was.
And Sweden, right next door. Sweden's thinner.
Yeah, I know. Well, just gives us an idea of where
No,
things.
no, Norway, Sweden's thinner.
Yes.
The one on the left is thinner.
Yes, I know. But it just sort of gives us an idea.
That's all
where-
right, that's all right. I'm just being silly here. Okay, that's better.
It's okay.
It's Trondheim, and it's Norway. It's Norway today. Well, it's next door. Yeah. We're seeing Norway.
I sold 6 cookbooks.
Oh, good. Okay.
You know that
Yeah.
kosher, California kosher.
Yeah.
I sold 6, so I
We all survived the rain. That's good. That was a lot of water. 2 days straight, non-stop. Just non-stop. Wow. It's a lot.
Heavy though.
Nope, but it.
I didn't have any heavy rain when I was out.
Uh huh.
It was raining.
The roads were pretty treacherous.
Drizzle. It was definitely raining, but it wasn't pouring.
Right, right. Yeah. I think it was just that it was relentless. Just not stop at all.
Getting a little tonight.
Yeah, 5 o'clock, we're going to get a big blast
Oh, okay.
till like around 10 o'clock, and then it's over.
Yeah. And then
Yeah. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. I'm glad everyone is here and didn't float away over the last couple of days. Absolutely. That was a lot of water. A lot of water. I had to, I really didn't want to go out of the house at all. I had to go out on, today's Wednesday, Monday, to visit two different people in two different hospitals. And the freeway was just, I got on the freeway, got in the right lane, and went 40 miles an hour. And I said, if you're behind me, too bad, because I'm not going any faster and I am not dying today. Thank you very much. It was treacherous. You went on Monday and Tuesday? Yeah, yeah. Okay, so today, it's a little cold in here, so today we're going somewhere cold. Let's go to Norway today, Scandinavia. Has anyone been to Norway? Okay, so let's have a couple of first-hand reports, and then we'll get started.
I didn't go to any Jewish sites in Norway, but I want to tell you that I had sticker shock when I went to Norway because it's probably the most expensive country that I've ever been to. Oh, wow. I mean, super expensive. We went to a nice restaurant, and it wasn't fancy or anything, and the bill was $80. So, you know. For the two of you? Huh? Yeah. Well, at that time, I would have paid about $40 in the United States. So, you know, but it's a beautiful country, and we really enjoyed it. But have a lot of money when you go there.
Some of you know my granddaughter, Sarah, went December to Norway, and I said, make sure you bring back chocolate because they have good chocolate, not that I need it. They went to Sweden to buy the chocolate because Sweden is so much cheaper than Norway.
Oh.
Yep.
Sweden is cheaper than Norway. Okay.
No, it's not that you needed to know it.
No, that's good to know. Interesting facts. So here's where Norway is for anyone who is, you know, Germany is right underneath Denmark there. So that gives you an idea. If you take the middle of Europe and go straight up, basically, and you get to Scandinavia. So in Norway, the first mention that we get of Jews is in the 13th century. And not specific Jews, but just Jews in general as a people. And it grouped Jews along with pagans. And so it was an unflattering portrayal of Jews. And that shouldn't surprise us all. So this is the 13th century, so this is the 1200s, right? And in the 1200s, we just had a century of crusades, and the anti-Semitism was very high. So it shouldn't surprise us that Jews would not be written about in a good light. There's no textual evidence that there were any Jews in Norway at that time in the 12th century, in the 13th century. Meaning, there weren't any contracts, there weren't any legal cases, there's no paper trail that there was a Jew in Norway in the 1200s. In 1436 and 1438, the Archbishop prohibited celebrating a day of rest on Saturday, lest Christians would mimic Jewish practices. So now we're in 1436 and 1438, and we get the first known mention of Jews living in Norway right around the same time. And there is the admissibility of the Sephardim in 1492. They were given a special dispensation to enter Norway. So clearly 1492, every country just about that we've, if we didn't realize before this class what a huge deal the expulsion from Spain and Portugal was, I think we all now have a much better understanding of how it affected the entire world in terms of Jewish populations. It was a huge, huge event. I had known it was a huge event, but even I didn't realize that it was quite as profound as we have seen in this class.
Do we have a number for how many Jews left Spain and Portugal
Let me see.
at that time?
You mean a total number of Jews?
Yeah, I mean, how large was the Jewish population that left in 1492?
You know, I don't know. I don't know. And they left, say again? Oh, sorry. Susie, thank you. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Eileen was very effective last week. And so the question is, do we know in total how many Jews left Spain in 1492? And my answer was, I don't know. But I will make an effort to get some numbers for you. So the Jews were given, Sephardic Jews were given a special dispensation to enter Norway. From 1536 to 1814, Norway was part of the Danish kingdom. And there were many restrictions against Jews to uphold the Protestant Reformation in general and against Jews in particular. So,
Is there an estimate of 40?
estimates range from 40,000 to over 150,000.
That's a wide range.
Well, also remember that 1492 was the Alhambra decree, and then over the course of the next years, Jews left. It wasn't like 1492 came, the Alhambra decree came, and every single Jew in Spain was out that day. It didn't work that way. It was over a period of time. So, as I just said, so 1536 to, yes, ma'am. Yes, Janice, what does it say? What does your number say? Yes, 40 to 150,000. Right. Thank you. Thank you. So 1536 to 1814. And we have the effects of the Protestant Reformation, which happens around when? 1500, correct. Remember how we talked about the idea that 1500 is such a hugely important date, right around 1500. What happened, what are other things that happened in 1500? Printing press. Huge. Maybe the greatest invention in the history of humankind. Say again? The discovery of the Americas. The Martin Luther, the Protestant Reformation, exactly. Turkish, so that's the Ottoman Turks. That's 1453. It's a little bit earlier than that, but approximately 1500. Hungary was invaded 1526. So the Ottoman Empire is establishing itself in 1500, yes.
The Renaissance.
The Renaissance, very good. We have the explosion of the Kabbalah in Jewish history. So 1500 was really it was a very big turning point in world history.
And the beginning of science.
and the beginning of science. Very nice. Okay, so there were many restrictions against Jews because the Protestant Reformation had happened in 1500. And what was the Protestant Reformation about? About indulgences. It was about indulgences. Anyone else? About being so overbearing by the Catholic Church. Yes?
Graven images.
Say again?
Graven images.
Graven images. Corruption of the church. Good. These are all right. So the Protestant Reformation was a very big deal. Up until the Protestant Reformation, everyone was Catholic. And you were either Catholic or you were Eastern Orthodox. Clearly, we had that at that time. But in Europe, you were Catholic. And in order for you to gain forgiveness from God, what did you have to do? You had to go see the priest. And he granted you forgiveness from God. And what the practice was at this time was, the church would say that you would come in, you would confess your sins, and the priest could say, well, you know what, the church needs a new wood-burning oven. Why don't you donate that, and then you'll have your forgiveness. These were called indulgences. They were kind of like bribes. They asked for money, they asked for things in order to grant forgiveness. And the church was very corrupt in other ways as well. And it was overbearing. And Martin Luther got sick and tired of it. So what did Martin Luther do? He posted what? Facebook. Yes. He posted things on the door. Okay, very good. So Martin Luther basically rebelled and said, no way. And we had the beginning of Protestantism. And part of Martin Luther's philosophy, when he first posted the items, was that the Jews are going to read this. They're going to see that there is a new way for Christianity here, and they're going to all get on board and convert. Yes, and so the Jews told him very clearly, no, not today, not tomorrow, and not ever. Not going to happen. It didn't work with Muhammad either. So Luther got virulently anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic at that time. And he called us vermin. Yes, he did. He was very, very anti-Semitic. And Luther comes from the tradition. So in the early church, we had Paul and we had James. From Paul, we get, from Paul's tradition, we get St. Augustine, who was a very, very, very important Christian writer. And then we get to Luther, having the same ideas. From James, we go straight into Catholicism. And from James, the differences between James and Paul essentially had to do with, give me 1 second, I'm having a senior moment. I'm not so young. I'm not so young. What is the word? I can't think of it. I can't think of it for right this second. It'll come to me and I'll blurt it out. But the idea was that James said, you get to heaven through your works and your deeds. Paul said you get to heaven through your faith. So it was faith and works from James and faith from Paul. Works were important, but not so much. It was about faith. If you read Paul's letter to the Romans, it's very succinctly laid out there that faith in Jesus is all you need for redemption. And so that is the tradition that comes into Protestantism. Protestantism is you gain redemption by faith. Faith and faith alone. And Catholicism is faith and works, faith and deeds. Okay, so there were many restrictions against Jews as part of the anti-Semitism that comes out of the Protestant Reformation. In 1569, Frederick II decreed that all foreigners had to affirm the most essential 25 articles of faith of Lutheranism. So, clearly, when Martin Luther begins Protestantism, the first Protestant movement is Lutheranism, right? That's Lutheranism. And it was basically the official religion throughout much of Europe. It became. And if the Jews didn't affirm their allegiance to Lutheranism, they were deported, or their property was forfeited, or they were even put to death. By the 17th century, so now we're talking about the 1600s, we have the earliest specific reference to a Jew in Norway. It was a Portuguese Jew who was allowed to settle. And the king at the time, Christian IV, issued a letter of safe passage to a Jew whose name was Albert Dionis in 1619. So that's the first mention of a specific Jew in Norway. By 1630, Jews had been granted a general amnesty to travel freely around the kingdom. That apparently was a very big deal. Jews were restricted from moving around in the kingdom, from going from city to city. Over the next 100 years, 1630 to 1730-ish, something like that, the mid-1600s to the mid-1700s. The mid-1600s to the mid-1700s, that should go ding, 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 ding. What happened at that time? American Revolution, okay. One of the biggest movements in the history of the world. The Enlightenment. The Enlightenment happens basically 1650 to 1750, from Descartes to Voltaire, basically. And we've gone over this several times, but it bears repeating because the Enlightenment is so important. What was the Enlightenment, the secular Enlightenment? Here. I'm getting the evil eye from the rear of the
I think
room.
one of the things that happened with Rousseau and Voltaire and Descartes, etc., they promoted science and rational learning, rationality, I guess you call it, rationalism.
Very good, very good. So the sort of the big change that happens during the Enlightenment is that reason, human reason, becomes the priority. Up until the Enlightenment, how did one determine how one should live one's life? Church dogma. Absolutely 100% correct. If you wanted to know how you should lead your life, you went to the priest. And the priest told you, this is what you should do, this is what you can do, this is what you cannot do, and on and on. And remember, at this time, people's lives in many ways were determined from birth. What was your social status? You couldn't move up, you couldn't move down. It was determined by how much land you owned. There were a number of things. And the church determined for you, in terms of morality and in terms of ethics and in terms of business, what you should be doing. Go ahead.
Before the Enlightenment, a lot of the population was illiterate and couldn't read, and they took the word of the church as how they should think and act.
Correct. Cecil. Wait, you got to talk into this. They won't, Susie won't accept it. See, claro.
Well, but I don't remember, but I'm going to improvise anyhow. Look, back then, society was very stratified. You were in this level, and you couldn't get out of it, and here was, the nobility was out there, and the peasants were down here. And you couldn't cross the limit.
Thank you, thank you. By the way, the earlier word that I was searching for was justification. In the Catholic and the Christian tradition, it's justification by faith and works or justification by faith. I don't know why that word slipped from me, but it's hard getting older. Anyway, okay. So the Enlightenment changes everything, because during the Enlightenment, as Rosalie correctly said, reason, rationality, science becomes the most important. And for humans, the most important thing was the idea that we get to decide for ourselves what is right for us. We don't have to listen to the church. We can determine with our reason what is the correct path for each of us. Now, for us in 2024, we think, well, yeah, of course we can determine what we want for each of us. That's how it is. But it wasn't that way. For hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, people didn't get to determine for themselves what their future would be and how they would live their lives. So this was a huge earthquake in Europe, that people were allowed to decide for themselves. And you can imagine, having had so much fidelity to the church, it took some time for this to catch on. Not everyone was on board with this immediately, but this moved over the course of the next 100 years, and it changed everything. Were you going to say something? Oh, I thought you were going to say something. Okay, so it would not be. So it's not unusual to us. So in 1630. There's a general amnesty to Jews, and they could travel freely around the kingdom. Over the next 100 years, as I said, various kings tolerated Jewish subjects, mostly the merchants, the bankers, and the investors, clearly because they contributed to the local economies. But at the same time, they also sought to keep them a little bit at length and restrict their movements a little bit, their residence, and their ability to engage in public life. There were some incidents where Jews were arrested, imprisoned, or put to death for violating the rules. But by and large, for the next 100 years, the treatment of Jews was sporadic. Sometimes it was good, sometimes it was not so good. Yes.
Was there an Enlightenment period for the Jews also that coincided, or did it come later?
Very good. So the Enlightenment for Jews, the Jewish Enlightenment, called the Haskalah, happens right after the secular Enlightenment. And the Haskalah is a very important event in Jewish history because it also injected reason into Jewish thought. In other words, the ability to question the Bible. How come there are two Adam stories? How come there are two Noah stories? And they're not at all alike. They're completely different. Why is that? How come God has two different names? Out of the Enlightenment, out of the Haskalah, the Jewish Enlightenment, ultimately comes the Reform movement. Because what was the great reform? Halakha is not obligatory anymore. It's voluntary. We can, by our reason, decide if kashrut is right for us. We can, by our reason, decide for each of us if being Shomer Shabbos is right for us. The idea of rights comes out of the Enlightenment. Before the Enlightenment, people didn't have rights. And Orthodox Jews today still do not see the world in terms of rights. What do they see the world in terms of? Obligations to God. Very good, Lana. Obligations to God. So in other words, the easiest way to think about this is on abortion. An Orthodox woman does not have a right to determine what happens to her body. Number one, it's not her body. It's God's body that's on loan to her. What she has are obligations to God regarding the fetus. If she will die in childbirth, it's already determined if she will die in childbirth, she must have an abortion. She is obliged. It's obligatory. That's what her obligation to God is, so that she stays alive to have more children. If the child, let's say, is determined to have Down syndrome or something akin to that, or let's say she had she did something the month before and that she wasn't proud of and it was a mistake and she just wants to get rid of the baby. The obligation to God is absolutely not. You keep the baby, period. And then there's a whole bunch of gray area in between when her obligation to God would depend on her mental state and other things. So if her husband came to her and said, look, we already have 8 children. I don't have enough money to feed 8 children. If you have this baby, I'm leaving, and that's it. She would be permitted to have the abortion because of the grave mental distress it would put her in. Okay, enough on abortion. But that's the idea. That rights, the idea of having rights, comes out of the Enlightenment. Say again? John Locke. Very good. Okay, so when Christian V comes to the throne, he rescinds the right to travel freely in 1641. By this time, there are some Ashkenazi Jews in Norway as well. Jews, and what Christian V said is that if there are Jews who are found in the kingdom within the boundaries of Norway, they were to be jailed and expelled. And this rule for Jews in Norway existed until 1851. Jews were not allowed to be found in Norway. Yes, Janice. I'll have to repeat. Okay.
I keep thinking that how are they
So Janice is saying, it occurs to her, how would they know Jews are moving around? It must be that there was special, they must have been required to wear special clothing, because that's the only way maybe that anyone could tell that they were Jews who were moving around from place to place. I think that's probably one very good point. I think that's probably true. I mean, it was happening everywhere else in Europe, so why wouldn't it be happening in Norway as well? I don't have a confirmation on that, but it makes sense to me, and I think it makes sense to all of you as well. And I think there must have been some kind of identification that you had to show when you moved from city to city. It wasn't that you just left and entered another place and everyone said, "Oh, hey, hi, come on down." I don't think it was like that. That's how it is in Russia still. That what? You have to have identification. You can't travel from one city to another.
It was normal in Europe for everyone to have special clothing. It determined your status. That's why people couldn't move up or down, because whatever your trade was, you probably wore clothing to indicate that kind of trade. So servants had one kind of clothing, the nobility had another one. So it would make sense that Jews would have their kind of clothing.
I think that's a really good point, yes. I agree with that. Sí, soy. Ven aquí, por favor.
Thank you for your concern. Okay, no hay problema. The idea that Jews needed some identification was down to recent times. My grandfather, he was a farmer, but he also, somewhere during his lifetime, as he was older already, was a minor functionary at Tsar. And one of the perks of his job is that he could travel, this is Belarus, he could travel to Moscow without a passport.
Okay, so that held until 1851, that Jews were not allowed in Norway. They were not allowed to be found in the kingdom. I don't know how strictly was that was enforced. I couldn't find any information on that, but it was a law on the books. No Jews in Norway until 1851. And then, as we just talked about, the Enlightenment creates some huge changes throughout Europe. And one of the changes that it does create is a little more tolerance for Jews, because people were able to determine, wait, is this rational? Does this make sense to us that Jews should be hated because of stereotypes and things that people say? So there was some easing in the anti-Semitic thought, mostly among the intellectuals, because the intellectuals were the ones who were writing about reason and rationality and science, and it doesn't make sense that we should think this way. The people themselves, we all know that. No, the people. This was more for the intellectuals. So there were some converts who came to Norway, Jews who had converted to Christianity, not necessarily conversos, but Jews who absolutely did convert to Christianity. And so there was a little more awareness in the public mind, and there were calls from the intellectuals to relax on the prejudice, relax on the stereotype. I don't think the populace listened, but it is found in some of the writings at the time. So we know that there were Jews in Norway since 1687. We have that specific mention. And in 1814, Norway gains independence from the Danish kingdom. And So at that time, Norway could have relaxed its ban and rescinded its ban on Jews, but it didn't. Norway reaffirmed the ban against Jews being in Norway. So that's 1814, and we know in 1851 it is going to get rescinded. Lutheranism was still the official religion of Norway. And as we said, in 1851, the ban is repealed. It was a vote of 93 to 10, so it wasn't unanimous, but the vast majority said yes, it should be repealed. At the time, Norway was worried about mass immigration. They thought, look, if we lift this ban, all these Jews are coming into Norway. Well, between 1851 and 1870, 25 Jews came to Norway. Big problem. 25 Jews came to Norway. And only 25 Jews immigrated before 1870. Yes. So how many Jews were there then? I don't have that number, but I can tell you this. After the pogroms following the assassination of Alexander II in Russia in 1881, so that's when we had waves of Jews leaving Eastern Europe and Russia. Many of them started the Aliyot to Israel. Many of them came to the U.S., and some went to other parts. So by 1910, which is like 30 years later, there were 1,000 Jews in Norway. And so you'll recall that with this huge immigration to the U.S., we understand that what happened with the Aliyot, that over a period of time, Jews came in various waves to rebuild the state of Israel. And that angered the Muslim, Arab majority population there because they saw more and more and more Jews coming in, and they were not going to be displaced as the majority population. That was not okay with them, clearly. And of course, the Jews we're going to build our homeland, our ancient homeland. We're coming in. We're going to clear this. We're going to, and the Muslims were like, "Excuse me, you're going to do what? No, this land belongs to us, and you are dhimmis. So learn your place, be quiet, do your thing, but no, you're not going to do all this other stuff on our land." And as we've talked about in previous classes, that becomes a huge issue, right? By 1920, we have riots in Jerusalem, and then that is the reason why Great Britain issues the White Paper in 1939 restricting immigration to Israel, or Palestine at that time, right? Because Great Britain didn't want to anger the Arabs. They didn't want to create more problems. And at that time, it was very clear that if things would go the way they're going, and all these Jews from Europe are going to come to Israel to escape the Nazis, very clearly we're going to get replaced as a majority population like that. Majority population. It is the problem in Israel right now. Okay, so the ban was repealed, and there were about 1,000 Jews in 1910. But the stereotypes against Jews were gaining traction. So Jews were sadistic, and they were obsessed with money. And so this is 1910. So recall that the Protocols of the Elders of Zion had been printed in Russia in 1903. The Protocols of the Elders of Zion was a fabricated, made-up work about a scheme by Jews to take over the world, basically. And and it was completely fabricated. There was nothing about it that was true, but it was published in Russia and was used to it was used to persecute Jews and used as one of the main ways to deride Jews. Henry Ford, huge anti-Semite, apparently, I'm told, had a copy of Protocols of the Elders of Zion in every Model T that he made. And and Hitler had a portrait of Henry Ford on his wall. So the Protocols of the Elders of Zion had come out in 1903. So by 1910, anti-Semitism was on the rise. In 1913, there was a ban on shechita. Shechita is kosher, kosher slaughtering. Okay, shechita. It's how you shochet, exactly. It's the ritual slaughtering of the animal for kashrut. And there was a ban on shechita in Oslo. In 1917, we have the 1917. We have the first use of the swastika by a Norwegian writer. This is years before Hitler uses it. In 1929, there was an all-out ban on slaughtering animals which haven't been stunned or paralyzed first. And that ban is still in force. There is no ritual slaughtering in Norway. All of the kosher food is imported. There was some kind of attempt by the Islamic Council to okay sedation as a substitute for paralysis or stunning, but the Norwegian government did not approve any ritual slaughtering of animals. So, as I said, all the kosher meat is imported. In 1939, Norway, 1939, so we know 1938 is Kristallnacht. So 1939 is the beginning of the really terrible stuff. And so there were attempts to make Norway kind of a sanctuary for Jews. But in 1940, Germany invades and occupies Norway. So that was very short-lived and not hugely successful. Many Jews fled. 900 were smuggled to Sweden and also some to the UK by the resistance fighters. And in 1942, the deportation started. Out of 2,173 Jews, 765 died in Auschwitz. And of the total, about 28 survived. 28. And 25 went back to Norway after the war. During the war, the Norwegian civilian police force helped round up Jews. By the time we get to 1946, so this is a few years after the war, there are 559 Jews in Norway. From 1947 to 1949, Norway allowed 500 more from the displaced persons camps. So remember, after the war, Jews had no place to go. Many went to displaced person camps where they then were able to hopefully find a place to go. And as is true of many survivors, I think, or that I have met anyway, many of them met in displaced persons camps. And I think what ended up happening was, these were people who had been subject to incredible brutality. They found themselves in a camp with others who had been undergone the same treatment, And they found each other in these camps. And so I think some of them led to beautiful stories. Some of them led to, look, I'm alone, you're alone. Let's not be alone anymore and be together kind of thing. And it was just heartbreaking. So there were 500 who came from displaced person camps, and there were 800 who had fled earlier who returned to Norway. So by the 1950s, there were about 1,000 Jews in Norway. 700 in Oslo, which is the capital. You'll see at the southeast. And then about 150 in Trondheim, which is a larger city, kind of middle of the road, northern west. There are 41 Norwegians, either as righteous Gentiles or resistance fighters, who have been honored at Yad Vashem in Israel. In 1996, Norway established a committee to look at seized assets of the Nazis during the war, and also to talk about reparations. And so there were reparations that were given of 150 million krona. Now, I looked up 150 million krona and tried to, because in the research it just used that. It didn't give me the conversion into dollars. So by today's standards, 150 million krona are $21,645,000. Now, we have to imagine it wasn't that much back, in 1996, but it was still a large amount that the Norwegian government set aside for reparations. In 2001, the Museum of Tolerance in Oslo was established. And so by 2012, there were 1,500 Jews in Norway. In 2015, unfortunately, there were only 747 who identified as Jewish. So somehow, and I tried to find out why that number decreased. I don't know. A lot of intermarriage, probably, you're right. There are 2 synagogues in Norway, one in Oslo, which was first established in 1892 and then refurbished in 1920, and then one in Trondheim in 1925. Something interesting about that synagogue, it is the northernmost synagogue, it's the second northernmost synagogue in the world, next to Fairbanks, Alaska. I just thought that was kind of interesting. Chabad is in Norway, in Oslo. Good for Chabad. Good for Chabad. Good for Chabad. They good for them. They take great pride in finding our people wherever we are, and so good for them. I really, it is. There have been some issues of anti-Semitism in the 2000s. In 2006 and 2008, there were shootings at the Oslo synagogue. No one died, but there were reports of vandalism and shooting. And today, in terms of anti-Semitism in Norway, there is a fair amount, especially among the Norwegian Muslim community, but also there are church leaders as well as political leaders. Good question. Gary asked, what's the size of the Muslim community? I don't know, but I think it's fairly significant. I will go back and look at that. So that is Norway, and so we have a little sense of what Judaism was like there then and is now. Have a wonderful week, everyone. Stay dry tonight. We're going to get hit again around 5 o'clock, really hard, for about 4 or 5 hours, according to the weather people. And then it's supposed to be done Done, 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 done. And we can open the hatch and let the dove out and see if the dove brings us back our little twig, right? My goodness. This was just nonstop. But I'm glad everyone is safe. Have a wonderful class now, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Did you happen to get a chance to look up that Becky? Oh, I completely forgot. I will. Okay. Yeah, BECCHIO. Yeah. Italian. Probably there. Yeah. Okay. I'm sure there's a family. And that's a city. That's his name, Del Vecchio. Because Del Vecchio means from Vecchio. Yeah. So I'm sure there's a city, Vecchio. Yeah, okay. And he claims that, well, I told you that they were Jews, okay. Rabbi, so are your future Bernie just found out 182,000. That's a lot.
And Norway. Did you try those chairs in the sanctuary? So uncomfortable. I haven't even gone in to see. I don't know who ordered it, but that's so uncomfortable.
Oh my goodness, I have no idea.
But I do. I sat in it.
Yeah, I'll go look when I'm here.
It's very, very hard to sit on, like support whatsoever, and the pocket, what we wanted, you can put a support in and that's it, or a trolley, and that's it. Very tight. I hope this is not debated for so much.
Susie, interested in playing mahjong after class?
It's not,
Huh?
I could play if you call it play, how I do. I don't
Well,
have
you're
my-
welcome, we don't care. Because there's just, I don't know if Rosalie's available, maybe we'll just ask her, and then, because
I don't
there's
have
only
my,
3 of us.
I don't have my card.
There are extra, Susie has extra cards.
Thank you.
Okay, so Susie, you'll play for a little while, maybe an hour or something like that. Huh? Oh, they didn't want to go home? Oh, okay, great.
Thank you.
Helen, you have this set? Okay. We have to We have to move to the social hall, but afterwards, because the school uses the space.
Wait, what?
For Mahjong. Oh, for Mahjong. Yes, I know, it's very important, you know.
I think it's important.
It is, it's very, it's a good social thing. I've made lots of new friends. Yeah, I've made lots of new friends playing Mahjong, so.
I don't blame you. I haven't. Susie offered to teach us how to play mahjong, but when she offered,
You were
I
too busy.
was I hadn't come on board here too much earlier. And I was just swamped.
Yeah.
with things.
Well,
And
when-
now I really want to learn how to
Okay,
play.
I'm sure she'll start another class soon, once, you know.
After you learn, you can come to me and I will fine tune it. I will teach you to play
Lana
well.
taught my husband, but he gave it up anyway.
Yeah, he was struggling.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if I would
I
be
can
able to
fine-tune
regularly
it.
play, but I'm so fascinated by what draws people that I really want to
it's
know.
a challenging game.
It's a mind challenge. It challenges your mind.
It does, you have to think, you know,
Not
constantly.
just that, I think it's also the company.
And there's
Oh,
the
it's a social,
camaraderie,
it's a
but
social
whatever.
involvement,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I never could play in a professional
No.
environment because they take
Not
it too
interested in-
seriously.
Yeah, I know, I'm not interested in doing that anyway. Yeah, Lana and Susie probably could play in tournaments.
I do.
You do?
You do?
Yeah.
Wow,
So,
very impressive.
yeah, it is.
It's not that hard. If you learn good habits in the first place, and that's what I teach is
It's the
good
ability to be
habits.
flexible.
You can just go into a tournament and it's like playing regular. It's not. a
But
big deal.
they have all these
Well, one of the things I teach is how to play within 15 minutes.
Cecil, you're way in the back today.
You know, I took Peter to look at his sister
doesn't stop him
in
talking.
Florida. First of all, they have different rules.
Yeah,
And secondly, it's like her group plays for 10 times the par.
yeah.
It's ridiculous. It's not fun that way.
It would be fun for me.
Yeah, well, okay, Lana, maybe, but
But I only play for $4, so it's not a big deal.
yeah, exactly. I mean, I keep $5 in my purse, and I've never lost.
Hi.
Yeah. No, if you play well, playing,
It is 11 o'clock.
I win more than I lose.
11 o'clock.
Then I'm not playing with you.
Right, I just forewarn, I win more than I lose.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning to everybody at home. It's quite chilly in this room, so if you could all put on some blankets on your lap so that maybe at least you could try to keep us warm in a fantasy way. Something is really off kilter when Cecil's sitting in the back row. All right, I think that we're ready to get started. As I let you know, and some of you, let's see, is anybody new here today? Is this your first time? No, of course not. Second, yeah. So I am filling in for Rabbi Schuldenfrei today, and since he returned from Israel recently, I offered to take on one more week. And it wasn't actually for him. It's because I really like being with you. No, I'm kidding. I did it for him, but also for me. I really do like being with you. So we're going to do one more study of a Talmudic portion this morning. And then I will hand over to Rabbi Schuldenfrei the list of hopefully remembering all the different things that we have done during this class period. And I think it'll be really interesting because he's doing some rabbinic texts this next semester, and it will be really interesting for you to see the different kinds of ways that people can find texts and also present them. So I think it'll be a good experience for you. I know it'll be a good experience for you. So what we're going to do now is we're going to start with saying the blessing for learning, and then we're going to hop into a text that's got some wonderful aspects to it about how you treat other people in the way that we speak. And I know that Melinda and Warren had a little bit of this because I've done a little bit of this before, but this is a much more in-depth look today at a tractate in the Talmud called Baba Metzia. You know, like, so in Yiddish, I didn't grow up in a Yiddish-speaking family, but Metzia is when you get a good bargain at something. You know, that's what it is in Yiddish. What?
It's like a bargain.
A bargain. Yeah, and they say in Yiddish the ganze Metzia, like, and that's what they're saying when they're saying the whole, you know, the whole thing, the whole bargain. So this is where that word comes from in Yiddish, from Baba Metzia. Baba means it's the volume, the tractate, and Metzia is about business, give and take. So that's what these texts come from. It's fascinating how not personal they are, but how human they are. So let's do the blessing for learning and see if we enjoy doing some of this. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav vitzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. And if you're like me, you've been soaked with enough over the last number of days, but soaking yourself in Jewish learning is a whole different story. So I am going to ask a couple someones to please distribute the texts. Don't get freaked out. We're not going to go through all of this. It's quite a lot. But I couldn't resist making sure we had it all. So when you get it, so who wants to describe what Mishnah is? Last session, we've been talking about Mishnah and Gemara and Talmud the whole time we've been together. What's a Mishnah?
Early commentaries on the Bible. On Torah.
Yes, early rabbinic commentaries on the Bible.
It's a shorthand version of the Mishnah, Gemara, and all that.
Yeah, it is a shorthand version, but not by design. That's just the way the first number of legal thoughts emerge. So they're shorter, and the Babylonian Talmud particularly, for those of you who are in the Jerusalem Talmud class, you'll know the Babylonian Talmud is very wordy, very wordy. The Jerusalem Talmud less so, but what we study mostly is the Babylonian Talmud. So who will read the Mishnah? Dun, dun, dun. Somebody, come on up. Thank you.
Just as there is a prohibition against exploitation in buying and selling, so there is
It's ona'ah.
ona'ah in statements, verbal mistreatment. Verbal mistreatment. The Mishnah proceeds to cite examples of verbal mistreatment. One may not say to a seller, "For how much are you selling this item?" if he does not wish to purchase it. He thereby upsets the seller when the deal fails to materialize. The Mishnah lists other examples. If one is a penitent, another may not say to him, "Remember your earlier deeds?" If one is a child of converts, another may not say to him, "Remember the deeds of your ancestors," as it is stated. And a convert shall you neither mistreat nor shall you oppress him.
A beautiful Mishnah, absolutely beautiful Mishnah that we're going to talk about more through the Gemara because they're going to have a lot of different examples of this. So, but let's start with the very first part. Don't read on because it has nothing to do with what we're talking about right this minute. Oh my God. Nobody listens. You know, when I went through rabbinical school, I had this fantasy that when I was going to be ordained as a rabbi, like suddenly people would stop and they would listen and they would be very, you know. And I'm kind of glad to say that didn't happen because I'd rather be a person than a figurehead, right? So anyway, let's talk about this for a minute, which is don't go into a store. I think a couple of you are in classes with me. We've discussed this before. It's one of my major things. Don't go into a store and look at stuff and pretend, you know, that maybe you're going to be buying it if you're not going to buy it. So let's talk about it from the Mishnah perspective. Why is that important in the Mishnah? Why is it important in the Mishnah? Look at what they're saying. Who is it that's going to be upset by it? Okay, the storekeeper. Now, obviously, they live in a very different generation than the one we live in today, because what they had we just talked about it in terms of the courtyards and who could have a business in a courtyard, all of that kind of thing that we already discussed. But obviously back in that day, and almost up to this period, people had little stores. So it made the difference about whether they were able to feed their family if one person came in during the day. So what I want to ask you, if you have anything to say about that, please do, but I want to ask you a few other questions. Gets a person's hopes up. Right. And it's a real person. So, yes.
It steals their time.
It steals their time when they could be working on something else. Is this brief, Zisel, so that I can repeat it, or do you need to come up here? Just go for it. Okay.
It is prohibited because it's a form of deception. You ask for the price, the seller thinks he has a sale, and you just mobilize nothing.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, what did you get a price?
It's a form of deception when somebody goes and asks a price and then they don't really intend to buy.
Okay, that's the key there. That's the key there, because you can go and ask the price. If you don't like the price, you don't have to buy. But if you going in there and checking to see how much somebody paid for your gift, that's totally wrong. If I go shopping for something and I'm not intending, I might tell like I went into somebody's house I wanted to see it. My son ended up buying the house, it turns out. But I said, I'm a looky-loo. I've always wanted to see this house. So I was telling them up front.
I'm not going to be a buyer. Okay, now let's deal with this because they're not going to, yes, I'm sorry, Susie. Not a problem.
My issue with this is I might buy it if the price were right.
Right.
But you're saying I can't even ask.
No. Do not ask if you really do not intend to buy. If you go in legitimately to go and look at something and it's too much money for you, then you say it's too much money. Back in that day, then the shop owner would decide well, am I going to lower the price or not? But it's different than what you said. It's only if you know you don't intend to buy. So
Another aspect, something that people do today, really do today,
Well,
it's the same subject. They go into a store to find out the appliances, and they look at all these appliances and compare them and take the people's time and then buy it on the internet.
Thank you. That is my big issue with this. But what? She said, and she said very correctly, and it was good because that's what I was going to say next, is that people nowadays, most everybody does this. They go into a store if they need to buy something that they want to make sure they've looked at it first, and then they go buy it on Amazon. How is it different? It's different because most of the stores we go into now are big conglomerate stores. How is it the same? Because I know that you, as well as I, have seen more than too many stores that are brick and mortar close in communities, thereby doing away with the jobs of the people who work in those communities because we do those things. Because we check it out and then buy it online.
Well, is it against buying it online because it's cheaper? I don't want to pay $1,500 for a washing machine online, not $1,000, and I can return it.
Okay, you don't want to pay $1,500 for something when you can buy it for $1,000 and return it. You could absolutely buy that washing machine online. However, the transgression is to go and look at it, use up somebody's time, use the store to go look at something, and then decide that you're going to buy it online. If you want to buy this is strong Jewish law. It's absolutely strong Jewish law. Because no matter what, if you go and use up the time of the person who's the hourly person, maybe they're not going to care. But if a lot of people go in and make use of that time and don't end up buying anything, not because they don't like it, but because they can get it cheaper online where where they don't have to pay for electricity, they don't have to pay for the building, they don't have to pay for the hourly staff, they don't have to take out the insurance. None of those things people have to do if they have a store instead of an online store.
Yeah, I do want to say something about Costco because I do buy a lot from Costco. Maybe a lot of you here do. But when you buy online at Costco, it's more expensive than if you go in person. You know, that definitely with clothing, you get a discount when you go in person to buy it. So it's kind of the reverse thing that they encourage people to go to the store, probably because when you go in there, you buy other things.
That's a good technique. That's a good technique when you own both the online store and the brick and mortar store, because it means it can drive your own traffic into the store. But it doesn't work when it's somebody else's appliance store in North Hollywood and it's somebody else's online business. I can't, let's just say I spend my life telling my husband the same thing that I'm telling you. So obviously not everybody listens to this, but what I wanted to do is I wanted to enter your heart and your mind when you are doing these things. Because not only now does that affect that one shopkeeper, that affects your neighborhood. That affects your state, your city. That affects those things. So everybody probably went to Bed Bath & Beyond back in the day, right? If you had kids going to college, you went there and you registered for their things, but everybody Who hasn't been in a Bed Bath & Beyond store?
Never.
I rest my case. They were in communities all over the country, and now they're not. And it's
Coupon to get a better price, so you don't mind going into Bed Bath & Beyond.
So let me repeat. You have every right to buy something however you want to. What we don't have in Jewish law is the right to go to use somebody's time to get their hopes up, to try and find information that's important to us when we know darn well that we're not coming out of that place with what we looked at. I want to move on.
I'm a salesperson. I sell furniture. People come in, look at the chairs, sit in the chairs, take out their phones, and take a picture of the tag and the price and the model number and everything. And it is abominable. Take up your time, your space, we pay for, and and so I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. Well, you obviously really have that experience. So, so just keep this in mind. In this Mishnah, they already knew in a different way, but it guides us as well. So I hope everybody feels really guilty the next time they do that.
No, not at all. It depends on your pocket. Maybe you have to save the money to buy the item.
Maybe you do, but what did I say? Did I say you can't buy the cheaper item?
Yes.
No, I did not.
No, I didn't say you said it. I said, yes, I will.
Okay.
You're trying to make me guilty.
I am if you go into a store and take up that place's time, energy, money, whatever, and then go do it. Yeah, it's totally against Jewish law. I'm just a representative of Jewish law. Yes.
So if you go in, I recently bought a refrigerator. Oh,
Yeah, go ahead. You recently bought a refrigerator.
and I was looking around at the appliance stores.
Mm-hmm. Looking at the appliance stores.
Yeah, I didn't see there the refrigerator that I eventually bought. However, I did look at various models and whatnot, and there wasn't. And in one instance, a salesman did spend a lot of time with me. But if you'd gone in and just said,
I'll
I
repeat
wanna
this.
look on my own, would that make it? Would that Yeah, would that make your heart at ease?
Well, it's only partially about my heart at ease, but okay, you went to look at stores. The refrigerator you ended up buying, you bought online?
I did buy it online.
Okay,
and
but
I
you
never
had
saw that
not
model.
seen it in any of the stores. Let's say you genuinely go in on Black Friday. You genuinely go into the store because that's picking up your discount concern, right? You go into the store on Black Friday and you go and look at all the refrigerators and you don't find what you want. That is not a mistake on your part. It is the mistake, the transgression is intention.
Okay.
So I would recommend to everybody, if you want to get a good discount on something, go when they're having a big sale. And we're done with this now. So let's go on. Okay, so let's go on a little bit. I know, this is, yes?
Yes, we travel a lot, so we were out of the country.
Do you need to?
Okay, we travel a lot, so we were out of the country in a remote village, and I buy drink glasses basically because they take up no room for souvenirs. So we went to a stall, and the lady had a drink glass. She wanted $13 for it. Well, the going prices generally run between 7 and 9 for the same glass. And we said, that's a lot. And she says, we haven't had a lot of business lately, and this is our only income. And I bought the glass.
And I took it back right away. She gave me a refund. I held it for $6.
Yashar Koach.
Well, she was a good salesperson.
Okay, so maybe it was true.
Might have been.
Maybe it was true. Okay, so now let's go on a little bit. So in this, we may get no further than a Mishnah. So, so what about the last part? The last part. If somebody has been transgressor and changes their ways, what are we supposed to do?
Not remind them of their bad ways.
Not remind them. And if somebody becomes Jewish, this used to be a major issue in Jewish communities. If somebody becomes Jewish, what does the Mishnah back in the 1st and 2nd century of the Common Era tell you you must not do? Thank you. You must not remind anybody that they used to be something else. Not because they can't do it. They can talk about it as much as they want. But I don't know if this happened to you, but I grew up in lovely Jewish communities. But when somebody would become Jewish, people would talk about it. People would, say, people were not as welcome all the time back then if they had chosen Judaism as though it has to be in your blood, which it absolutely doesn't. So I remember that from my childhood. Yes. I can't hear you at all. So, do you want to say it? Okay.
We have with Lakish, where someone wanted to buy weapons and he knew more about it or something.
Reish Lakish, yes.
He was the expert in all this.
Oh, right, and thank you for bringing that up, Belinda. That's when we read about Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan. Even when he became a huge scholar, that's exactly what happened in that text. We read it together. Rabbi Yochanan dissed him because he used to be something else. He was a highwayman. Thank you. So, yes, even that comes up in the text. So now I'm going to run through this instead of having you read it because it's really important. But it's convoluted. So the sages wrote, you shouldn't mistreat anyone, man and his colleague. You should fear God because I am the Lord your God. So then, Atana is the earliest generation of Talmudic rabbis. The verse is speaking with regard to verbal mistreatment. Verbal mistreatment, right? And the Baraita, as you know by now, is a little piece of text found in another text, and we don't have the whole other text. Do you say that it is speaking of verbal mistreatment, or perhaps it's speaking only with regard to monetary exploitation? So now ona'ah, which is mistreatment, can show up in a number of different ways. It can show up by stealing somebody's money or mistreating them with money. We all know about that. It can show up by what you say to somebody. So it says in a previous verse, if you sell to your colleague an item that is sold or acquire from your colleague's hands, don't exploit them. Monetary exploitation is stated. So then they say, well, what about verbal mistreatment? So what they're going to do, I'm not going to read the whole text to you, is they're going to say both of these things get mentioned by the rabbis and by the Torah in the text. cheating somebody with money, and being really terrible to somebody by what you say to them. So let me ask you, because we read this in the Mishnah and it's being repeated here, which is more important? Which is more important?
I think that if you cheat somebody out of money, it's a temporary loss. It can be replaced. But if you verbally insult somebody, that's a more lasting hurt. And because it's a more lasting hurt, it's a deeper sin.
Okay, you can do something wrong to somebody with money, but when you do that, I'm paraphrasing you, there's a chance that can be changed, right? There can be something that happens where a person gives back the money, or there's some kind of negotiation that's made with regard to it. But if you go and you speak badly about another person, particularly in a public sphere, you can't ever take that away. That stays with people. You can try to apologize for it. You can come and ask for their forgiveness at Yom Kippur. You can do all of those things. But when you say those kinds of things to a person, it stays. You know that story about the pillow that people tell on Yom Kippur that's filled with feathers, and the rabbi says to a person who's doing those kinds of things, speaking against other people, okay, go, do teshuvah, go and spread and open up that bag and let all those feathers out and collect them all. And the guy comes back and says, I couldn't collect them all. They're feathers, they're flying everywhere. And the rabbi says, bingo. Well, he doesn't really say bingo. But he says, yes, exactly. When you do those kinds of things, you can't pick up all the pieces of it ever. So they go, now they've done this again. So look at the first paragraph on the next page, because I love what they say here. So if one is the child of converts, another may not say to him, remember the deed of your ancestors. And if one is a convert and comes to study Torah, one may not say to him, does the mouth that ate unslaughtered carcasses and animals that had wounds that would have caused them to die within 12 months? Treif, right? Treif things. You know what treif means? It means not kosher or unclean, but really, literally what it means is if you were one of those people who had an animal and you tore a limb off of an animal while it was living. In Japan, they do that with sushi. They actually do. The fish, I'm going to tell you, don't get too grossed out. The fish, my husband told me, the fish swims in the water, and when they want a part of the fish to be very fresh, they'll slice off a piece of that fish while that fish is living.
They do that here too with crabs.
Oh, yeah.
They pull off the leg, and
They do it with crabs.
the legs grow back.
Oh, the legs grow back.
They throw the arrow back in the water, and the leg grows back, and that's why they do that with a certain kind of crab.
But it's still pain. I would imagine that it's still pain. Another reason not to eat those things. Okay. So anyway, then it says, everybody at the middle paragraph, if torments are afflicting a person, if illnesses are afflicting him, or if he's burying his children, one may not speak to him in the manner that the friends of Job spoke to him. The friends of Job spoke to him by saying, oh, there must be something that you did wrong. If this is happening to you, you must have transgressed in some way. So if they're warning people that that's not the case, you have to be more sensitive than that. So who wants to come up and read donkey drivers and Are you interested in this text? I mean, is it, okay, so, could somebody come up and read, please?
I can read.
Okay, first and then second time. Here you go.
The whole thing?
Well, I'll stop you. I'll be rude and stop you.
Okay. Likewise, if donkey drivers are asking to purchase grain from someone and he has none, he may not say to them, "Go to so-and-so, as he sells grain," if he knows about him that he never sold grain at all. He thereby causes the donkey drivers and the would-be seller anguish. Rabbi Yehuda says, one may not even cast his eyes on the merchandise for sale, creating the impression that he is interested, at a time when he does not have money to purchase it. Verbal mistreatment is not typically obvious, and it is difficult to ascertain the intent of the offender, as the matter is given to the heart of each individual, as only he knows what his intention was when he spoke. And with regard to any matter given to the heart, it is stated, "And you shall fear your God," Leviticus 25:17, as God is privy to the intent of your heart.
Okay, so they give a lot of explanations. One of the things is that, you know, people in business do this all the time in different ways, but when they talk about the donkey drivers who don't necessarily have the grain that is needed, and they send them to another colleague, sometimes they sent people to another colleague so that then that person would be kind of sucked in to buy something else, even if they knew that that what they were looking for the other person didn't have. And that still goes on in businesses when people mislead people into thinking that if they go to this place or if they go on even this site on the internet, you're going to be able to find what it is that you want, and when you get there, it's not the case. So it's very clear that all of these things that they're talking about, are real for us now, as real for us now as they were for them. Because they also say, what do they say about the heart here? What do they say? God knows what's in your heart.
Yeah, only God knows.
Only God knows, which means, of course, that when we do things and we don't verbalize them outside of ourselves, we still have somebody watching over us. So that's a faith question. But it's a faith question that throughout the millennia has made people stop and think about whether they should be doing whatever it is that they're doing. And sometimes that's called guilt, whatever it is. And sometimes it's called God is watching over you. But they know that you're not always going to verbalize these things, but you're going to do things inside yourself. Watch out. Watch out. Here, I'm handing this to you because I think it's going to drive Susie crazy if we don't.
Okay, I understand what you're saying, but it goes against, I mean, I am a convert, actually. And one of the things was a big deal was when you're Jewish, it's more what you do that matters, not just what you think. It's not just because you have faith in something. It's because you act, you go the act.
I think that, hold on. You're absolutely right, but I think that what you're combining are two different things. They talk about people who become Jewish and the fact that people should just never bring it up unless the other person wants to, so that's a different story. Then they're going on and they're talking about other ways that you can harm people with what you say. Some of it is in business, some of it is in human respect. They come in different in different areas. Does everybody get that? Okay, I mean, I think they just go one after the other with them. But you're right. I mean, certainly all of Judaism is, do you remember when President Jimmy Carter said that he lusted in his heart? Yeah, didn't do anything really, but lusted in his heart, and that was a big transgression for him. In Judaism, doesn't even count. Because human beings are going to have a lot of thoughts and a lot of emotions and a lot of things we want to do, but that's like a human brain and a human heart and a human soul, and as long as you don't actually do them, whatever those them things are, then God doesn't care if you have a wrong thought. The thing that they're talking about is if you don't talk to anybody about what misdeed you're going to do, it's not about spreading the word. It's about what you are planning to do inside yourself. It's different than thinking about it, right? So if you're going to go and you're going to tell that person who wants to buy grain that you don't have it, but your friend 2 miles away has it, and you haven't told that to anybody, it doesn't matter that you didn't tell it to anybody at the time, your friend, watch out for those people who are coming. It matters that you thought about it and then you did it. But if you just thought about it, nothing. You can have whatever thoughts you want as long as you don't transgress in real life.
Yeah, this is a generic question that just hit me because this is all wonderful dialogue to have here and to listen about the Talmud, the Gemara, and moral behavior. And I was just thinking that it's wonderful that it's being shared in this context here. But I come to shul every Shabbat, and I'm wondering why isn't it coming from the Bima as well? That we do the drash and we learn about Torah and the interpretation. But why can't we hear about moral behavior, good moral behavior coming out of the Talmud also on Shabbat? It's just a general.
I like the idea of doing a little bit of that from the Bima, but everybody's welcome to come to my Talmud class every other Shabbat after shul. So we do have learning, but I think that it's really nice maybe to have a little piece of that. I hope. I mean, we're almost at the end of this additional time together. We have 20 minutes, but I hope that you come away from this experience thinking this is a really cool text. Talmud is amazing. It's this combination of human and virtuous and not virtuous, and all of it gets put out there. It's just absolutely beautiful. It's something we should be extremely proud of. The only time anything was erased from the Talmud, literally, only time anything was erased from the Talmud was when the church, I don't remember exactly what the years were, but there are things that are written about people who could potentially be Jesus that are not very becoming in the Talmud. But the Jewish people didn't erase that. Even when times were bad, they didn't hide anything that was in the Talmud. But the church came and required Jewish communities to erase anything that it had written. There were other people named Yeshu, so we're not even sure in the Talmud if all of them are that one, right? Jesus. But they made them erase all of that. The only reason that we still have it is because there were communities, Jewish communities, that were not controlled by Christianity. And they didn't erase it. So now you can still study those things. But I'm just giving you that example to let you know that Jewish scholars, let's put it this way, never, ever, ever, ever erased any of it. Not the bad about the rabbis who did things that were not appropriate, and believe me, there are a lot more than what I taught you, and nor the things that changed over time or any of that. It's all still there. It's like this incredible human history and conversations, which I think is the best thing ever. Okay, so let's go to the middle of the next page. And would somebody read the paragraph that says the Gemara relates that the Tana who recited Mishnayot and Baraitot? Oh, come up. Oh, yeah, Zisel, I forgot. You're the next person. Good, I'm glad you didn't forget.
Thank you. The Gemara relates that the Tana who recited Mishnayot and Baraitot
yeah.
in the study hall taught a Baraita. Before Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, anyone who humiliates another in public, it is as though he were spilling blood. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak said to him, "You have spoken well, as we see that after he humiliated you, after the humiliated person blushes, the red leaves his face, and pallor comes in his place, which is tantamount to spilling his blood." Abaye said to Rav Dimi, "In the West, that is to say, Eretz Israel, with respect to what mitzvah are they particularly vigilant?" Rav Dimi said to him, "They are vigilant in refraining from humiliating others. As Rabbi Hanina said, everyone descends to Gehenna except for three."
Okay.
Continue?
Dun, 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 dun. Not yet, because people might want to say something about it. What do you make of this? You can still stand there. What do you make of this paragraph that the rabbis say?
What does except for three mean?
We didn't get to that part yet. We're going to do that in a minute. That's why he's still standing here. But I want to talk about anybody who humiliates another in public. What? It's like killing them. It's like killing them. Now, you do understand that the rabbis did not say you can't go home to your husband or your wife or your friend or whatever and say, "Ay, that person really annoyed me. I think that I just don't want to be around them." Nobody says you can't do that. We're human. We have reactions to things and to people. However, this is huge because you can't sit in the restaurant. Let's put it this way. You can't sit in the restaurant with a table with 6 people around you, where there are people all around the restaurant who could hear exactly what you're saying and totally, as my kids would say, totally diss another human being. You can't do that. You have to be cautious of in what situation you say something because it's the pillow. You know very well that in some place, let's say we're all sitting here and we're talking and we say, "Oh, that Rabbi Alexander, like blah, 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 blah," whatever you want to say about me. It's probably some of it's true, but it doesn't matter. What matters is that you said it in public, and then the respect of that person is marred all the time. You know how things spread around. So, no, you can't do that. So now let's get to the part that you're asking. Anybody have anything else to say about that?
I think that in this part that we're discussing right now, humiliation is an equivalent of murder.
That's exactly what they say. Thank you. That's exactly what they say. And I love, go ahead. It's good exercise, right? Get up and want to talk.
So it reminds me of the Orthodox and the prohibition of Lashon Hora. Because when you say something bad about another person, three things happen. It makes that person look terrible, makes you look bad, and it makes the person who hears it, look bad, actually. So those are the three things that happen. So when next time you go to talk about somebody, think about that.
Yeah, you just taught some Gemara. That's in the Gemara. It's a continuity of this discussion. Thank you. No, the third person who's standing there listening, it's bad for them, because what you're supposed to do, honestly, even if you're sitting with a close friend and you're at lunch and they're gossiping about somebody, you're supposed to say, can we change the subject? Or, talk about something else. You need to say, I'm not comfortable talking about this right now, because it's something that really makes the other person stop and think if you're not going to take it in. So, yeah, and that goes for if you're hearing somebody speak about something and it's abhorrent to you, you can say, I really would prefer not to be here and listen to this. So, thank you for your additional Gemara. Okay, so everyone goes to Gehenna. What's Gehenna? Dun, dun. It's not actually hell. It's a waiting room. A waiting room. Yeah, a holding tank. There you go. Okay, so why don't you go ahead, Zisel, and read a little bit more of this.
Just a comment in Gehenna. I sort of equated, since we don't know
Put
what
it more
Gehenna.
toward your mouth so people can hear you.
I'm sorry?
Put the mic
Okay.
closer.
In terms of Gehenna, I equated like going into a desolate place. There's nothing, totally devoid of any human interaction. Anyhow, back to
So we learn about that on Yom Kippur when there are the two goats, the goats for Azazel. One gets sacrificed, and it's in the Torah. Look for it next year. and one gets sent into Gehinnom, which for them was like a desolate area of land where nothing grew and nothing was, and that in place got turned into, this holding tank. So go on and read this.
The Gemara asks, does it enter your mind that everyone descends to Gehenna? Rather, say, anyone who descends to Gehenna ultimately ascends, except for three who descend and do not ascend, and they are, next page, one who engaged in intercourse with a married woman, as this transgression is a serious offense against both God and a person, and one who humiliates another in public, and one who calls another a derogatory name. The Gemara asks, with regard to one who calls another a derogatory name that is identical to one who shames him. Why are they listed separately? The Gemara answers, although the victim grew accustomed to being called that name in place of his name, and he is no longer humiliated by being called that name, since the intent was to insult him, the perpetrator's punishment is severe.
I thought that this is a beautiful paragraph of understanding. Because, you know, either in TV or in books or in radio shows or in real life, we've all known people who got really horrible nicknames when they were kids, or they were bullied by being called those names, or some Jews who ended up being called derogatory names while growing up. I remember I was in like 4th grade or something, and some kid called me a kike. I had no idea what that was, but I went home and I asked my parents, and they told me, and it stayed with me for a really long time, that person was calling me a hateful name because I was Jewish. I had never experienced that before. And so they have it this way, so that even if you give a kid a name like Fatso, right? Because they're heavy when they're kids, and they don't care so much about that nickname anymore because they've been called it so many times. Nonetheless, you knew what you were doing when you said that to that person. You knew that you were trying to destroy an aspect of their, their sense of self, the way that they were seen in the group of friends, whatever. So you don't ever get to, at the end of your life, return from Gehenna, from Gehinnom. So those are two different things. The derogatory name actually might be even worse than, I guess it's not worse than humiliating somebody in public. But if you humiliate somebody in public once, you can never be redeemed for it. But it may actually be a step down from humiliating somebody with a name over and over and over and over again, even if they learn how to internalize it. So thank you. And yes.
I don't think anybody's perfect in terms of, when you kind of lose it, and you may say something that you're embarrassed to have said. How do you get forgiveness? I don't see anything like, how do you make up for it? I know you mentioned about feathers out of a pill, but personally, if it really affected you, how are you able to free your conscience of that and remove the guilt?
Let's just say that I think that the rabbis, there are 3 other reasons that people do not get released from Gehinnom. So it's interesting that they say that these 3 things. I think that these 3 things are really symbolic to scare the heck out of anybody who's going around being that kind of person. Yeah. There are actually 3 other options for things that are more serious. Like there's one time you can't emerge from Gehinnom if you have sexually assaulted a child. You cannot emerge from Gehinnom if you become an idolater. So those are examples that are probably even more serious. But the lesson here is that, and it's the rabbis who are saying this. The rabbis are saying, watch out. Because if you do this, you are in trouble. So we're closing. Oh, go ahead.
I just had a last comment on the piece that we were dealing with. It seems to me that the moral is it doesn't really much matter what you say, it's just the intent that you had when you said it.
I think it's a little bit more than that, Cecil. Usually I agree that you're right on target, but I think that they really don't want it. They want you to think about what you're going to say before you say it. So even if your intent isn't to harm or hurt somebody, let's deal with one thing. Nowadays, okay, if you walk up to somebody and you say, gee, you look great. It looks like you must have lost 65 pounds. It's just amazing. It's taken so many years off your life. Well, somebody might say, thank you. That's exactly what I had in mind. And somebody might say, that means you noticed how I was before, and that it really affected you how I was before, so that you're saying this now. Or somebody could have lost all that weight or whatever because there's something going on with them, and they're not particularly interested in having somebody come up to them and try to make it something. So honestly, they don't have an intent. Those examples, they don't have an intent of harming somebody. However, it really means that we need to stop and think about what we're saying before we say it, to make sure that what we're saying isn't going to have a contrary result for the person that we're saying it to. So I think it's both. In the Gemara, they give more clear examples, but if I don't know, like you could call somebody a name like, Stinky. When I was in high school, one of the guys in USY, everybody called Stinky. And I didn't think about it till years later, because he went by Stinky. But it's exactly what they're talking about. Like he internalized that and just accepted it. But still, not a good thing to do. So I would put both of them together. I want to suggest to you that if you're interested in this text, there are two additional things in this text. One that talks about, and I'm just going to give a hint in case somebody decides to keep this. This is about the way that rabbis felt that women should be listened to. So what I want you, if you decide to keep that, great. But what I want you to keep in mind is that there's not just one viewpoint here. If you take a look at what's written about what rabbis think about how you should listen to your wives or not, it's the individual rabbis who are saying what they think, who get told by other rabbis who contradict them. So there are a number of those things. And in this text also is a whole other text that you don't really need to go into, but it's about the oven of Achnai and about some of the other things. Maybe I'll hand this to Rabbi Schuldenfrei and say, we got this far in the text. Maybe you want to do this. So, but I really thank you all for taking this journey with me. I hope it means that you'll want to study a lot more Talmud and have a lot of fun with it, because it is quirky, meaningful, important, very human, and it spans the generations.
So I want to formally thank you. This was a really good journey that we had with you.
Thank you. I really enjoy it every minute.
So my husband, I guess they studied this text with Rabbi Bernhardt or some, at some point, and every time I start to talk about somebody, he goes, yeah. Whether I'm saying something good or bad.
Yeah, you're not supposed to say something good or bad.
Yeah.
It was her text that we learned.
Yeah, I guess it's a little bit different. But, it wasn't about talking about some, saying that something bad to somebody in public.
Oh, just want to let the women know, it could be the men as well. This Sunday is an authors event here at Adat Ariel, sponsored by Sisterhood, an author that we talked about a week ago, an author who comes from Israel and wrote a wonderful book about her relationship with her husband, who came from a different culture than she did and had different Jewish ideas than she did. And it's a wonderful gathering to talk with that author. And there's free brunch. So if you haven't signed up for it yet and you want to come, it's from 10 to 12 on Sunday, right here at Adat Ariel.
That's this Sunday.
Yeah, I signed up for it yesterday.
Yeah, from 10 to 12. That's my daughter's friend speaking.
wants to come on Sunday, but she doesn't know how to sign up